The automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss, and in that ordinary sound, no one realized they were hearing the beginning of a chain reaction that would flip the entire store upside down. It started with a single customer, a single step inside, and a mood so sharp it could cut glass. By the time those doors would open again, nothing inside would feel normal. Stay with this story, because the smallest moment you're about to witness will spiral into consequences no one could control. The store was busy but calm, the kind of weekday afternoon where time moves slowly. Carts rolled lazily over tiled floors, scanners beeped in steady rhythm, and employees worked on autopilot smiles. Then she appeared. Her posture was rigid, her pace fast, and her eyes scanned the room like she was already looking for a fight. She didn't smile, didn't hesitate, and didn't read the signs posted at the entrance. She marched straight toward the customer service desk, dragging tension behind her like a shadow. At first, the employees didn't panic. They had seen difficult customers before. Complaints about prices, returns, policies, all part of the job. But something about her tone changed the air. Her voice rose just enough to draw attention. Sharp words snapping at a young employee who was barely old enough to hide their nerves. Heads turned. Conversations slowed. A few shoppers paused mid-aisle, sensing the shift before they fully understood it. The employee tried to help, calmly explaining the policy, pointing to the printed notice taped clearly to the counter. That was when the customer laughed, loud and mocking, a sound that sliced through the store. She accused them of lying, of disrespect, of targeting her personally. Each accusation landed heavier than the last, building pressure in the room. Phones came out discreetly. Whispers spread. The calm rhythm of the store began to crack. A manager stepped forward, hoping to de-escalate, but the customer only grew louder. Her gestures became dramatic, her words more reckless. She wasn't just upset anymore. She was performing. With every sentence, she pulled more attention, more energy, more chaos into the space. People stopped shopping. Employees froze. What began as one complaint was turning into a spectacle, and no one knew how far it would go. Before anyone realized it, one customer's behavior had shifted the mood of an entire building. And this was only the beginning of what was about to unfold. Security cameras silently recorded everything, capturing faces, reactions, and the exact second patients began to evaporate. Somewhere in the back, an employee reached for a radio, unsure whether this moment required help, backup, or simply hope that it would pass quickly. The manager kept their voice calm, but the tension in their shoulders gave them away. They had dealt with angry customers before, yet this felt different. The woman wasn't listening anymore. She was feeding off the attention. Every person who stopped to watch only made her bolder. She pointed around the store as if the walls themselves were guilty, accusing the business of poor service, discrimination, and disrespect, all in the same breath. Nearby, a cashier quietly turned off their register. Another employee pretended to straighten shelves while keeping a careful eye on the scene. The store's rhythm had completely collapsed. No one was shopping with focus anymore. People were watching, recording, whispering. Some felt uncomfortable. Others were entertained. A few were worried about how far this might go. The manager offered a solution, a compromise that would have ended the situation within minutes. A refund, a store credit, even an apology that bent the rules slightly. But the woman rejected it all. She didn't want a fix. She wanted control. Her voice echoed off the ceiling as she demanded someone higher up, someone important enough to deal with her. Each word dripped with sarcasm and entitlement. That was when another customer stepped closer. He hadn't planned to get involved. He was just tired. Tired of waiting, tired of the noise, tired of watching employees get verbally cornered while everyone else stood silent. Calmly, he asked if she could lower her voice so others could shop. The request wasn't rude, but it landed like gasoline on a fire. She spun toward him instantly. Her anger shifted targets, locking onto him with fierce precision. She accused him of harassment, of taking sides, of trying to silence her. Her finger jabbed the air inches from his chest. The crowd reacted with a collective inhale. This wasn't just a customer complaint anymore. This was turning personal. The manager stepped between them, hands raised, asking everyone to take a breath. For a split second, it seemed like the storm might break. Then the woman shouted a single sentence that froze the entire store. Loud enough for everyone to hear. Serious enough to change everything. Phones came up higher now. Employees exchanged looks that said the same thing. This had crossed a line. The customer who spoke up took a step back, realizing he had walked into something much bigger than a bad mood. Somewhere near the entrance, a child began to cry, overwhelmed by the noise and tension. In the security office, an alert was triggered. Protocol shifted. What had started as customer service was now a safety concern. The store's atmosphere felt tight, heavy, like the moment before a storm breaks. No one knew what the next move would be, but everyone could feel it coming. One person's behavior had now dragged strangers, staff, and management into the same uncontrolled moment, and the consequences were about to ripple far beyond this argument. Within moments, the energy inside the store shifted from uncomfortable to alarming. The manager quietly spoke into their radio, choosing words carefully, while keeping their eyes locked on the customer. Employees near the front were instructed to step back, creating space that felt less like courtesy and more like protection. Shoppers sensed it too. Carts were abandoned mid-aisle. Parents pulled children closer. The store no longer felt like a place to buy groceries. It felt like a scene waiting to explode. The woman noticed the change and smiled, a tight expression that suggested victory rather than relief. She raised her voice again, repeating her accusations, now louder, more dramatic. She claimed she was being threatened. She claimed she felt unsafe. Each claim contradicted what everyone had just witnessed, yet she delivered them with such confidence that a few bystanders hesitated, unsure of what they were really seeing. The customer who had spoken up earlier stood silently now, hands visible, clearly trying to distance himself from the chaos. He looked around, realizing how quickly the situation had turned against logic. The manager asked him to step aside, not as blame, but as prevention. It was a small decision, but it sent the wrong signal to the wrong person. The woman seized on it instantly. She announced to the crowd that she was right all along, that the store had finally realized its mistake. Her voice carried triumph, and with it came permission, at least in her mind, to push further. She stepped closer to the counter, leaning forward, knocking over a display of pamphlets, paper scattered across the floor like confetti at the end of a parade no one wanted. That sound, sharp and sudden, was the breaking point. A security guard emerged from the back, posture firm, expression neutral. The room went quiet in an unnatural way, as if everyone was holding the same breath. The guard spoke calmly, requesting the woman to lower her voice and step away from the counter. It was professional. It was reasonable. It was too late. She refused. Not with words at first, but with a laugh. A dismissive, challenging laugh that echoed longer than it should have. Then she spoke, accusing the guard of intimidation, of abuse of power, of things that carried weight far beyond the walls of the store. The guard repeated the request, this time firmer. Shoppers began to leave. Not slowly, but urgently. Registers were shut down. A manager locked the side entrance. The store was changing in real time, adapting to one person's refusal to stop. What should have been a quick errand had turned into an evacuation. As tension tightened, the woman reached into her bag, and in that single motion, every eye snapped toward her. Fear doesn't need facts to spread. It only needs uncertainty. And in that moment, uncertainty ruled the room. The moment her hand disappeared into the bag, the store seemed to shrink. Sound dulled, movement slowed, and every instinct in the room screamed for caution. The security guard stiffened, raising one hand in a universal signal to stop. The manager's voice followed, calm but urgent, asking her to show her hands and step back. No one accused her of anything out loud, but the fear was already alive. She paused just long enough to feel the power of the moment. When she finally pulled her hand out, it wasn't a weapon, just a phone. She held it high, announcing she was recording everything, threatening lawsuits, jobs, reputations. Relief rippled through the crowd, but it didn't erase the damage. The line had been crossed. The situation was no longer about a return or a policy. It was about control and escalation. The security guard explained that she needed to leave the store. The words were firm, final, and backed by procedure. That's when her tone shifted again, this time toward disbelief. She insisted she wasn't leaving until she was treated fairly, repeating the phrase as if saying it enough times would make it true. Her voice cracked between anger and outrage, bouncing off the walls like an alarm that wouldn't shut off. A police call was made quietly, without drama, but its impact was immediate. The store moved into lockdown mode. Employees guided remaining customers toward the exits. Lights dimmed in certain sections. What was once a familiar space now felt cold and unfamiliar, rearranged around one person's refusal to cooperate. The woman paced, still recording, narrating her own version of events. She pointed at employees, at the guard, at invisible enemies only she could see. Her story painted herself as a victim surrounded by villains, and with every step she took, the gap between reality and her perception widened. Outside, faint sirens cut through the air, growing louder by the second. Heads turned toward the entrance. Some people felt vindicated, others felt nervous. The woman heard them too, and instead of calming down, she squared her shoulders. This was no longer just an argument. This was a standoff. When the police entered, their presence was steady, controlled, professional. They assessed the scene quickly, separating emotion from facts. One officer spoke to the manager. Another approached the woman, asking her to lower her phone and listen. She refused, talking over them, demanding names, badge numbers, accountability. The entire store had been transformed in under 15 minutes. Normal routines were erased, trust was shaken. All because one person couldn't let go of a moment that didn't go their way. As the officers prepared their next step, everyone watched, knowing this encounter would not end quietly. The officers spoke calmly, giving clear instructions and measured choices. Leave the store voluntarily or be escorted out. The words weren't threats, just outcomes. For a brief moment, the woman hesitated. The room leaned into that silence, hoping it meant the storm was finally passing. Then she shook her head, lifting her phone higher, declaring that she wasn't going anywhere. That decision sealed everything. One officer gently reached for her arm, and the reaction was immediate. She pulled away, shouting that she was being attacked. The other officer stepped in, and within seconds, the scene turned procedural. Controlled. Predictable. Her phone slipped from her hand and clattered against the floor, the sound echoing louder than any scream had before. Shoppers watching from outside the entrance gasped. Employees stood frozen, emotions tangled between relief and shock. The officers guided her toward the door as she continued to protest, her words tumbling over each other, no longer sharp, but desperate. When the doors finally opened and closed behind her, the noise stayed outside. Inside, the store felt hollow. A place once filled with routine now carried the weight of what had just happened. Employees slowly returned to their stations, some shaking, some quiet, all changed. The manager gathered the team briefly, thanking them, acknowledging the stress, reminding them that they had done nothing wrong. Customers trickled back in, cautious at first. Conversations were different now, softer, more aware. Strangers exchanged looks that said, "Did that really just happen?" The store reopened registers, lights returned to normal, and the familiar beeping sounds resumed, though they felt different, almost fragile. Later, security footage would be reviewed. Clips would circulate online. Comment sections would fill with opinions, arguments, and assumptions from people who weren't there. But inside those walls, the truth was simpler. One person's refusal to calm down had disrupted dozens of lives, even if only for a moment. By the end of the day, the shelves were restocked, the floor cleaned, the pamphlets picked up. On the surface, everything looked the same. But the people who witnessed it carried a new awareness. How fast normal can vanish. How quickly behavior can reshape an entire environment. As the last customer checked out and the doors locked for the night, an employee glanced at the entrance and shook their head. All of this, from one moment, one choice, one customer.